Welcome to the Venostic Managing Change through POWER4. And I believe we have a fair amount of folks on today, and it is now about 3 o'clock. We're going to get started. So just wanted to first off say that if anyone's having any problems connecting, the instructions to log in should be fairly straightforward. Some people have been having some issues with audio, but I believe those are being sorted out. Let me go ahead and just do a little bit of house cleaning first. So as far as the webinar logistics, as we're going through this, and if you have a few questions on anything, of course, feel free to ask questions at any point throughout the presentation, although we will have a Q&A session at the end, and that's perfectly fine. If you look on your screen, you should see an icon here that says Q&A, a little button. If you click on that, it allows you to go into the chat function. You can type in any questions. That's great. If we don't have a chance to get to answer everyone's questions during this session, we'll also be blogging about it, and we will also be following up afterwards. So by all means, feel free to listen in or ask questions as we go through. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Make Change Work for You, the truth behind success or failure of information technology projects. And this is a subject that is really near and dear to my heart. I've done quite a bit of work in the IT space, also everything around change and transformation. And it's quite an interesting intersection where all of these different aspects come together. And I want to share some of our experiences with you and see what we can, what great conversations and insight that we can generate here. So first off, a little bit about me. My name is Stephen Williams. I'm the CEO of Engage IT Global. We're a Venostic partner. You can tell from my, my accent. First of all, I'm from the United States, and I've been in school a very long time. I think longer than I care to remember sometimes. But I've done quite a bit of ERP and BI implementations all around the world. And the studies that I've gone about have been in transformation and change for ERP projects. So it really is something that has been quite fascinating, particularly having the opportunity to do technical work, also functional and sitting in the boardroom, et cetera. So having the opportunity to experience projects from all vantage points, whether it be technical or business facing, really has exposed some of the issues that organizations typically face when looking to implement large systems. So enough about me. Let's talk about you. So I'll start by asking this question. Where are you now? Now, there are several folks on this webinar from all sorts of different industries that have different concerns in their businesses. And I just wanted to just list some of the basic things that I think that many of us might be able to relate to that organizations may be going through. So let's look to see what all of the following have in common. So suppose you're going through a merger or an acquisition. In today's climate, there's quite a bit happening with mergers and acquisitions, of course, and those are major sources of upheaval and change in organizations when that happens. Or maybe there's a new corporate strategy that you're going through, some new direction that the company is moving, and there's a whole lot of change that happens there as well. Maybe you're putting in an ERP or CRM implementation. Now, with that, those types of systems are, from an IT perspective, the largest disruptor that you can apply to an organization because they touch everything. You put it in an ERP system, and almost no part of the business is left untouched. So they're quite serious endeavors. Or maybe even before getting to that stage, looking at how to select the actual solution, the product that's going to be used, or the vendors that are going to be putting in these types of systems. That's something to contend with. Or maybe there's a software mass rollout where you may have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people that are having to use a new type of software that you need to roll out, maybe in different locations, different countries, continents, etc. And of course, The old true one, compliance with new regulations. There's so many highly regulated industries that have lots of strict policies and procedures to adhere to, and making sure that your organization is in compliance can be quite a challenge. So these are just a few of the general types of challenges that many organizations may face at some point, throughout their cycle. So if you look at all of these, what do these have in common? I think another way to look at this might be to string them along from left to right, and with vendor selection on the left and software rollout on the right. And I would say that change management is the common denominator between all of them. You can't get any of these done truly effectively without some strong degree of change management. It's the one common thread that touches on pretty much every part of an organization when you're going through with major projects. So it's quite key. So let's talk a little bit about change management. I think one way to start to talk about change is to talk about what change is not. Now, I have, kind of a pet peeve of mine is to say that change is not an isolated activity. I've seen so many projects where some new project is going on, maybe it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it might be. And towards the end of that cycle, someone says, okay, well, we better go and start to do some change now, so let's go put in some training programs and pass out some flyers and that sort of thing. That is not really what I would call change. It's not something to be tacked on at the tail end of a program. Now, things such as training, stakeholder engagement, and making sure that communication occurs and things like that, they are, of course, essential components of change, but that's what they are. They are components, and they are particular tools that can be used to cultivate change. But change is a process. It's not simply getting something to start in one place and then moving to an end state where you have some satisfactory outcome and then you stop. Change is continuous. And it's getting into that mindset and that motion of all of the stakeholders involved, understanding that it is a living, breathing process that is a way of life. That is how you instill change in. Truly is a process-driven activity. I think another way to look at it would be, if we take a quick look at this slide, which really illustrates the ongoing process of it all. We have needs, alignment, objectives, action, and evaluation. Now, you notice through the arrows here, it is a continuous cycle, and you do this again and again and again as you implement your change initiatives. I think a good way to look at this would be to break them down one by one. So let's start with needs. So when you're talking about needs, you're really going back to the original business case. These are the strategic goals, the actual needs that the business has that drives you to actually do whatever project you're considering doing in the first place. This is essential because without having true guidance as to what the actual reasons and the benefits are, it's very difficult to have a clear direction going forward. It's really hard to know if you're going in the right direction or if you're making progress. So that needs is really, really quite key. Then you have alignment. Now, alignment is really the act of getting all the people that need to be in the conversation talking to one another. And I love this word here, requisite variety. What that means is putting teams together that have just enough people with enough representation to get the job done, but not too many and not too few. So on so many projects, we've seen massive teams put together that have, sometimes 20, 30, 40 people, sometimes for even small tasks or workflows. And when that occurs, things get bogged down. You can't make decisions quickly. That variety is too large to actually get the job done. So requisite variety really brings that down and allows the various people in the team to be able to collaborate effectively. And once the right team is put together, you can then start to have some useful conversations that lead you to defining what your clear objectives are. So the objectives really tie back to the business case. They should be the measurable milestones that let you know that you're going on your journey the direction that you want to go in. So you have to have a structured plan. And I love this second bullet point here where we say begin with the end in mind. I think a good way to have an analogy about that would be if you were to get in your car. Suppose you are in London and you want to get to a city in the north. You want to go to Manchester. And if that's the case, it's really helpful if you actually know where you currently are. You know that you're in London and you know you need to get to Manchester. So you're beginning with the end in mind. Your criteria for success will be if you arrive in Manchester. So with Manchester, you can see my cursor there now. If you're in Manchester and you see that, that means that you've now successfully fulfilled your criteria. And you have to have it, of course, in a certain amount of time. So that's where this ROI and measurable KPIs comes in. It's about having a plan and a means to measure it in a real quantitative sense so that you can really track your progress. Once you have that plan in place, then, of course, it's about taking actions. And with those actions, you make sure that you execute the plan and that you have accountability that's given to your team members. And that's really important, both at the group level, but also at the individual level, because we're really looking to empower folks so that they can have the freedom to be able to contribute and bring the best that they have to address the issues that you're trying to sort through. Once you go through executing your plan, you want to have the ability to evaluate how you're doing. And this is kind of like the flip side of begin with the end in mind. I like to see it as end with the beginning in mind. So in this case, going back to our analogy, if you find yourself in Manchester and you say, all right, I've arrived in Manchester and I set out to get here from London, therefore, we can conclude that we have successfully made that journey within the allotted time, let's say. But if you find yourself in New York, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. So always tying back to where you began. Always having those KPIs and the ROIs in mind. You know, what were the original objectives when you began? And sometimes things don't go the way that you intended. So we go about making adjustments. And those adjustments are really key. So once you have those adjustments in play, that really sets you up to ask the next question. What do we need now? This text here in red, it's always changing. What do we need now? What is currently going on? And you have to always be flexible to make the assessments, the evaluations, and changing how you approach things over and over and over again. That's really key. And I think one misnomer about change is that it is a means of control and getting people to do the things that you told them to do. And in one sense of the word, of course, you do want to have different types of outcomes compared to where you are, but it's really not so much about control. And change is about influence. It's not about domination and control. It's about enlisting people into the actions and the conversations and the decisions and pulling them along on the journey with you. That's really where you get some traction. So with this overview of, you know, the wheel of change management, it starts to give a good foundation as to the different elements that are required in order to pull through change. So you may ask, why is change important? Yeah, I love this iceberg slide that many of you have probably seen many times before in other contexts perhaps, but it really is true here, where you have the little bit on the top of the water, the tip of the iceberg. This is really the IT stuff that we always talk about when it comes to looking at technology products. So with that, we're talking about the ERP systems and the databases and the infrastructure, all of that stuff. That is really what we tend to focus on, what our budgets tend to focus on, our licenses, etc. But really, there's so much more that can make or break an IT project, and that's all this stuff here under the water. Your business strategy and your governance and compliance, key elements. Without business strategy, it's very difficult to know where you're going. Your business processes are also essential because that's how you align the activities with people throughout the organization to actually use the software that you're putting in. And these elements here in red, I think, are the most important. Benefits realization is really what this whole thing is about. So with benefits realization, that is actually achieving the results that you set out for when you began. Without realizing your benefits, there's no point in doing any of this. So always keeping a strong eye on benefits realization from the very, very beginning is essential. And one of the ways to help measure benefits realization is with ROI. And that's simply ways of coming up with particular measurable outcomes that let you track the delta between where you were and where you are. So this is why change is so important. And don't just take my word for it. There's lots of others that say the same thing. So Gartner has said that 70% of IT project failures are due to poor change management. The Economist, McKinsey, there's so many others that have come to the very same conclusion. There are so many different avenues and options for a project to go terribly wrong. Everything from resistance to change, which is a big one, lack of synchronization, poor measures. It just goes on and on. It's really important to bring change front and center to any project, whether it's IT or non-IT. At the end of the day, it really is all about change. We say, ignore change at your peril. Now, I've seen so many projects that have costed much more than they were originally scoped out to, took a lot longer than they were originally supposed to. Why does that happen? A lot of the time it is due to, for example, the capabilities delivered, where you're looking to boil the ocean. I love that term. It means have a white blank slate of paper and be able to put every possibility of every option that you want all at the same time. And it simply sets some unrealistic expectations to be able to do that. Next thing you know, you're costing a lot more. Your time is going a lot further. Without having a true ability to be able to set clear objectives and break things up into bite-sized pieces and take it in incremental doses with people joining along the entire journey, it really is quite dangerous. So what's at stake for you? Well, this slide is pretty straightforward. We have here money and time. Those are the two things we covered on the last slide. That's at stake. And of course, with money and time being lost, it makes it very difficult to be competitive. And of course, without that, innovation goes out the window as well. So there's a great deal at stake by ignoring change. Change is really essential. All right, so how can we help? Well, I'm going to talk a bit about the POWER4 change methodology. And, from this slide, there are, pretty simple graphic here. Things that begin with P: people, process, product, and program. Now, instead of going through all these in a great amount of detail, I think a more effective way to go through this would simply be to jump in with a real case study. And then you can see how each of these elements of the POWER4 change methodology can actually reap some benefits. Okay. So here's a case study. This is a real-life case study. This actually did occur. So this is a manufacturing company that, fairly successful company, medium-sized firm, with a long history of high-quality delivery. And they were involved quite a bit in the Olympics endeavors in 2012. And of course, the Olympics were considered, very successful Olympics, and they were singled out as being one of the key firms that contributed to that success. So they were shortlisted by the government for a £1 billion contract. Now that's a lot. Now we're talking about a medium-sized firm that is now looking at getting £1 billion worth of work, which is a huge, huge boost. However, with most things, there's a catch. So in this case, the government said that they simply must have an enterprise-grade ERP and CRM system, and they only had a year to do it. Now, this is a huge challenge. They were, before this, running on a variety of different systems, a bunch of legacy systems that were built up over time, also spreadsheets, phone, lots of different processes. I'm sure we've all seen these types of things before. So with that scenario, a typical project to put in this type of footprint of an IT system can usually take, in some cases, 18 months to 2 years. But they only had 1 year to do it. So they began a rapid install implementation, but after 6 months into this 12-month cycle, the project was in a lot of trouble. So the situation here in red is that you have stalled progress with only 6 months left, and there's £1 billion at stake sitting on the table that could be potentially lost. So you can imagine the pressure and the tension that was going on in that organization, and also with the vendors and the software organizers, etc. There's quite a bit going on. So it is in that type of situation where we were able to utilize a lot of the approaches and the principles and the things involved in the POWER4 methodology, as we're describing today, to really make a difference. So let's talk through that. We'll start with the people part. All right, so the first thing that we did was we went in and we did a readiness assessment. This is that where are you now? Going back to that analogy of driving from London to Manchester, it's actually deciding, okay, am I really in London or am I somewhere else? In this case, we're talking about the people aspects. This is looking at the skills of the people on the teams within the organization and really getting an understanding for how capable, how ready the organization is to take on the challenge that lies in front of them. So that's really, really important. Of course, requisite variety comes in. I always have to bring that one in. And that's assembling the teams with just enough variety in order to move these conversations forward and to begin to come up with some really great tangible objectives. And that goes through the alignment process. So we're setting our goals, we're making sure that everyone is together, making sure that we have tangible, realistic goals that we can actually meet. Empowerment is all about accountability. That is bringing people into the mix and giving them the authority to contribute. Without that authority to contribute, there's very little room or motivation to adopt new change. So that empowerment element is really key. And as that starts to build, you get your teams and your cross teams together. So we had different teams across the organization working together, really functioning as one organism. So whereas in the past, there were teams in the company that might work in isolation to other teams, not really understanding how one's activity might affect downstream another. So one of the things that was important for us to do was to really instill the sense of all of us working together as one organism, as one team, to move the organization forward. Once you start to do that, you have a nice momentum for capacity building. And this is where some of the training comes in. Training is important. It's definitely something that you must do. But I think what's even more important and more useful, certainly when it comes to rapid returns and embedding in new knowledge, is the idea of actually doing it. That's giving activities and going out and working with the business and working with stakeholders and making things happen. So the actual doing of the new capacity and skills is really, really important. Once you have that, you begin to develop a culture of sustainability. So with that, and it takes a bit of time, but once it gets going, it's really amazing to see how you have this culture of perpetual learning, that people want to adapt and grow into new ways of working. Because once you get the momentum going, your organization will face a challenge, but then you have the ability to adapt. People have the ability to adapt, and then you get to rise to the next challenge. And I'll come back to this culture of adaptation and growth later, because that really does come back in this case quite a bit. So let's move on to process. So with process, You have, of course, your business strategy and your objectives. So this is going back to that wheel slide that we went through a few slides ago. It's about establishing the goals and metrics that feed into the strategy. There have been so many projects I've seen where the business strategy is on one side and then the objectives is on the other. And the two aren't really connected. And it is essential that they are connected, that the objectives have goals and metrics that feed back to the strategy. That way you know you're actually able to measure your progress. Business process mapping is another key component. We have an approach using what we call red and green boxes, and this is a way of graphically representing activities that happen, let's say, within an IT system, red boxes, and then activities that happen outside of an IT system, which are the green boxes. And in this case, examples of that would be, for this organization, perhaps a set of procurement activities that would have to be typed into the ERP system, particular pieces of data and information and processed. But green boxes might be maybe meetings or decisions that had to be made offline. It's important that both of those activities are actually captured and linked together and documented so that there is a pull-through of the entire end-to-end flow. And once you have that, you're able to have some standard procedures, and that's where you have an opportunity to truly get down to detail with your governance and compliance. And I stuck applications and technology here at the end. And I did that on purpose. One of the things that I really want this slide to illustrate here is that, kind of like the iceberg that we looked at before, the applications and technology is an important aspect, but there is so much more involved that affect it. So from the top, the business changes, they do drive changes down to the lower layers, starting with your strategy and on down. And then likewise, technology changes enable changes in the higher layers. That is absolutely true. So it's seeing how this whole set of processes work together is really the key here. So with the POWER4 methodology, it's about looking at the processes at all these different levels, linking them together, and moving the organization forward. All right, so let's talk about product. So of course, in this case, because this case study deals with a project that was midstream, a lot of the major components were already decided. The product are, the actual pieces of software and the tools, the widgets that are going to be used. But even in that midstream scenario, when we came in, we took things back to basics. And that involves asking the question of, okay, do we really need to use all this stuff that we have? What is really essential for the needs of the business? And that's really the second area here. The business needs drive the technologies and not vice versa. So in this case, of course, the business need was to win that billion-pound contract. Everything else was secondary. So what were the criteria that needed to be in place to satisfy that? And we looked at things like performance and integration with other systems in the company, but also external systems. That's important. We looked at practicality. How easy or difficult is it to roll these types of changes out? How much training is required? What's the skill-based gap? There's so many things that you have to deal with when it comes to practicality. And when you're moving at pace, which we were, it's easy to lose track of strategic positioning. And with strategic positioning, you're looking at what are the foundational components that we can put in now that will lay the foundation and give the potential to expand onward without having to redo the whole thing. So a year from now or 2 years from now, when the company wants to do something bigger or bolder, something new, that they are already well positioned to take advantage of that in terms of product. That's really essential as well. So we went through that entire exercise and came up with the right mix that moved things forward. All right, so let's look at program now. Now with this program, here are how we normally approach this. We have this activity called a project audit. And this can happen before, during, or after a project. And of course, in this particular case study, this was a during. So things were already going on, and it was midstream, so we had to take a look and say, all right, what's going on here? And really, the point of doing this project audit is to have a third-party independent review that looks at the strategy and the requirements and the metrics and really come up with a good roadmap to take you from where you are now to where you want to be and make sure that the benefits that we're going after actually manifest. In this case, the benefit is a £1 billion contract. So once you have that assessment, then the task of the program component is to bring it all together. Again, that's linking the business strategy to the objectives that you measure, and then the plan, and then mobilizing everyone to do the things that you set out to do. Bringing it all together. All right, so the results. What actually happened with this particular project? All right, here are the outcomes. Unprecedented success, of course, with scope and speed of project delivery. Now, I mentioned earlier when I started, I've been in the ERP tech world doing implementations all over the place, and I've never seen so many pieces of modules go up. We're talking financials, projects, HR, CRM, and mobile field service in 6 months. It's absolutely staggering. Now, this was a great way to accelerate the productivity of the project with the steps that we took. And of course, the key measure, the company was awarded the £1 billion contract. And that was the measure. That's a great outcome. So everyone was very, very happy. And the interesting thing is that since then, since being awarded this £1 billion contract, the momentum was established. So the company from there went ahead to continue this culture of learning and improvement. And, you know, the proof of that is that the company recently was awarded another £2 billion in contracts. So in a very short amount of time, we're talking about £3 billion in new business, really helped out significantly by change management. It acted as the glue and the catalyst to get things going, both on the technology level, but also laying the seeds that allowed the organization to mature and accelerate its performance. And here we are. Effective change management accelerates success. All right, so if we were to summarize what we learned today, every project is really a change project in disguise. You know, I think it's really key to remember this particular phrase in that most IT projects tend to be looked at as IT projects, and then the other stuff is kind of put into a different category. I say that all IT projects are change projects. They're just masquerading as an IT project. You still have to do the IT work, of course, but it's how these changes are utilized throughout the organization that really make all the difference. So whether or not you succeed or fail with that, it's going to depend on how well you handle change. Simple as that. And effective change management can truly transform your business, as has been seen in the case study that we just went through. It can really make a big difference, and it can accelerate success, as in the case of this firm going from $1 billion to $3 billion in a very short amount of time. So with that concludes the overview of the POWER4 Make Change Work for You. I really do hope that you've gotten a lot out of this, and of course I'm free to answer any questions that anyone has throughout this process. I've got a few that have come in, but if there are any that I can look at first, that's fine as well. I've got one here that says, and I'm not going to mention any names, but the question here is, how do you enforce, a change in behavior? And I just wanted to challenge that question a little bit in the sense that by going through the slides we've gone through in this discussion, we see that change management isn't so much about control. It's really about enlistment. It's about bringing people along on the journey with you. That's really essential. So it's bringing them through with you and making sure that they are taking part in things, giving them the space in order to contribute, and to make sure that they are being heard. That's quite key. Another question I have here is how do you measure ROI? And of course that's a tricky one. ROI, particularly when it comes to any large projects, IT or otherwise, there's so many layers and levels through which things can be measured, and that can be tough. But I will say that there are lots of specific processes and outcomes that you can use to measure ROI, particularly when doing something like an IT system, because usually it's there to facilitate some sort of operational activity. So in this case, with the case study that we went through, one of the ROI measures was efficiencies regarding procurement. So there were some measures that we put in place about the amount of spend at past levels and the spend going forward, percentage of waste, things like that. And it allowed a pretty clear measure for us to be able to track progress. Other areas might be looking at the duration and the complexity of a month-end close on the finance side, for example. There are many different aspects of IT projects when you look at the business side that you're able to link into ROI and embed that in the implementation project itself. That can be quite helpful. And I'll just take one more question I have here is this one actually came early on, and I'll just read it out. It says, does change have a real impact? And I think after seeing the case study now, I think the answer is, I think so, yes. Huge impact. I know that for the particular company that we're talking about here in the case study, huge impact. There's no doubt about it. To get £3 billion worth of new business, with change being a key contributor to that success, it can make quite a difference. So I think I'll stop there. If there are any other questions, of course, feel free to follow up, and there are email links and things that are going out. I'm happy to answer any questions or have any follow-up discussions later on. So with that, thank you for your time. I do appreciate it, and this ends the seminar on Make Change Work for You, Change Management with POWER4. Thank you.